Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Brianna's Bachelor Breakdown. I'm Brianna, your Bachelor Relationship Analyst. If you love getting deep into the drama and unpacking all the relationships on The Bachelorette, then this channel is for you. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment telling me what you thought of the episode. So let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to be covering episode 4 today. So the first thing I want to touch on is the group date. I feel like that was one of the bigger storylines of the episode. So it's a slumber party. It's super cute, super fun. All the guys get like different pajamas that I guess are like coordinated to their personalities. And then when they pull up, there's like so many activities and fun things to do. Like they have popcorn machine, they have cotton candy, they have Build-A-Bear station, a foot, like the little massage things that you get at the nail salon for your feet. Like just the whole nine. And at first it's cute. Like it's cute, it's fun to see all the guys genuinely like being friends with each other and really just embracing kind of like this fun, like a little bit girly, like, or typically associated with young girls, kind of childlike spirit and activity. So I loved it. I was here for it at first. But then they took it a little bit too far. Like they were so into each other and so into hanging out with each other that they just kind of like forgot about Michelle. Like I really just think that's what it was. Like I don't think any of these guys intentionally set out to kind of make her feel bad or make her feel unseen, but I think they just kind of like forgot the whole reason why they were there in the first place. And it hit Michelle really hard. You know, she had to kind of leave the room at one moment. She was talking to the producers in the confessionals and just overall emphasizing that she felt very unseen. And that was really hard to watch. Honestly, like I don't feel like I've ever seen a bachelor or a bachelorette feel this way on a group date. Like just feel like excluded from their own group date, feel like they're not being invited to participate in any of the activities. No one is making an effort to talk to them one-on-one. Like it was just honestly very odd. It was very strange. And I felt really bad for her. Like no one wants to feel that way. And then that starts to make you question your connection with the guys, right? I bet in her head, and she kind of said this later on, that she feels like she's always the one making the effort. And so that kind of leads you to that place where it's like, if I stop reaching out to this person, are they really into me? Or is our connection only sustained because I'm the one initiating it and they're just not kind of denying my advances, you know? It kind of makes you take a step back and realize, like, who's really invested in this relationship? Is it just me? Or are we both equally invested? So that's pretty tough. And then it was kind of exacerbated by the arrival of the Bella twins, who I guess are WWE participants, athletes, I don't know. And so they roll up, they pull up, they're hosting like the fight of the date. I feel like that was kind of like overdone since we just had this last week with the Top Gun date. This one was a little bit more interesting. It kept my attention. I don't know if it was like the fact they're hitting each other with teddy bears instead of whatever they were using last week. But it was cool. But at the same time, like Michelle still didn't have the opportunity to participate and be involved in her own date. And of course that would have happened regardless. But it's just like she already didn't have that interaction beforehand, and so then for the second half of the date to be dedicated to an activity that doesn't include her, it just made her feel more isolated. Okay, so then after the date concludes and the winning team is determined, then Michelle again is still like not getting any attention from these guys, and this honestly surprised me because the stakes are raised on these types of dates due to the fact that whoever loses has to go home and doesn't get invited to the after party. And I thought for sure the guys, I mean, they're always salty about not getting invited to the after parties and if they're on these types of dates. So I thought for sure these guys would at least take the moment to kind of say their goodbyes to Michelle, make that lasting impression on her before they had to go home. But no one pulled her. None of the guys who even won even pulled her. Like, they were too busy celebrating with themselves. Like, it was weird. It was honestly very strange, and it only served to kind of worsen her mood and her isolation, which is totally understandable. So then, following the date, prior to getting ready for the after party, I assume, we see Michelle sitting down with Kaitlyn, and kind of opening up about how she truly felt during that group date. Tayshia and Kaitlyn kind of peeped that her mood was off a little bit, but she didn't really, in the spirit of keeping up a good face and a positive attitude in front of the guys, and I guess also to really process for herself first what was going on. She didn't really elaborate or let on that anything was wrong with her at the group date. But then afterwards, she sits down with Kaitlyn and she's like, yeah, this is what I was feeling. This is what happened. Da da da. And she brings it back to the fact that she's feeling reminiscent or similar to how she felt in the poem that she had expressed and read to the guys in the previous week. And that was really super impactful because I feel like it's one of those things where it's like your pain hurts worse when it's coming from someone that you explain your pain to, right? Like if you tell someone, hey, like this really gets under my skin, this is really a triggering behavior for me, and they hear you out and then they turn around and do that same thing, that is 10 times more impactful than someone who just like didn't know that that was a trigger for you. So that was, again, really hard to watch. I really felt for her in that moment. Like she was crying, and I hate that that happened. I've literally never seen a bachelor or bachelorette get treated this way. But the only positive out of this situation was just Kaitlyn's kind of the way she's carrying herself and the way she's embracing this host role. I love that she's such a good listener. I don't know if that's because the producers just edit out everything she says in these conversations to make it look like she's only listening. But I love that she kind of decenters herself, asks thoughtful questions, and she's not quick to be like, well, on my season, like, I had a similar situation, or this is how I would have handled it as a bachelorette. Like, she just kind of lets whoever she's talking to get what they need out to get out, and then kind of helps them realize or talk through what steps they want to take for them. So I love seeing her in this role. So then we pull up to the cocktail party, and I didn't really know what was going to happen here. I didn't know if Michelle was going to try to keep up that positive attitude that she had on the date, since she did kind of have that outlet with Kaitlyn, or if she was going to address it. She chose the latter option, which is great, and she addressed it with the guys and just kind of basically boiled it down to like, hey, I felt really unseen on the date today, and on top of that, just in general, I feel like I'm always the one trying to create little moments between each one of you guys, and I just feel as though it's not being reciprocated. And that is tough. That is really tough to hear, and that's not how you build a foundation for a relationship. You can't have one party putting in all the work and the other person just on the receiving end. So that was a super difficult thing. I think that she had to come to the realization too, and I think it was also clearly super difficult for the guys to kind of take that in and realize just how badly they had messed up, especially with the fact that they were so oblivious to it. And then Michelle, she immediately pulls Nayte. There was no breath. She said, yeah, I feel like I'm not getting any reciprocation. So, Nayte, do you want to come talk to me? Like, there was no breath, no time for any guy to kind of interject and try to start saving face immediately. She said, no, I know who I want to talk to. Let me go ahead and get this out the way, and then I'll deal with all of you non-final two contestants. Okay. I don't read spoilers, so I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I hope so. Anyway. So she and Nayte go over to the side, and it felt like one of those moments, like when you're a teacher and your whole class fails the test, like everyone fails, but then everyone also includes like the smartest kid in the class or the grade, and so then the teacher will pull that kid aside and be like, hey, like I know everyone failed, but like you specifically I'm worried about because I know that you know that material, and I know that you could have done well on this test. That's kind of what this felt like, because her feelings for Nayte are so strong. And as a result, she's built up certain expectations for him. And I think she was kind of saying to him, like, hey, based on what you've shown me so far, and based on me seeing your character and developing feelings as a result, these are the standards that I hold you to. And if you don't rise to the challenge in each and every interaction, then I will start to lose interest for you. And I mean, that's pretty clear to me. I think Nayte got the message. And what I really liked about how Nayte handled this conversation is that he didn't get defensive. He didn't try to make an excuse. He wasn't like, oh, well, it was so fun. And like, we had so many activities. Like, what were we supposed to do? Like, no, he was just like, bet. Like, I hear you. Let me apologize. And we can move forward from this. Like, he just accepted responsibility. And that was that. He didn't make a big deal out of it. But he also had a mature reaction to her feelings. So again, Nayte, y'all know how I feel about Nayte. So even though he disappointed in the first half, I felt like he kind of picked it up during this conversation. So then to kind of fast forward a little bit, Nayte was involved in some other drama towards the end of the episode. But it really started at the beginning of the episode, right? Tayshia comes in, gives everyone the group date card, and his name is on it, meaning that he did not get the one-on-one. So he just kind of announces to the room, he says, hey, like, I know it kind of sucks to not get the one-on-one, but I have a feeling that it's coming for me, so I'm just going to be patient until I do get that one-on-one time with her, right? That's what he says. And then Chris goes back in his confessional, and this really rubbed him the wrong way. Like, this really just got under his skin. He was really just, like, all types of bent out of shape about it. Okay, we come to the rose ceremony. Michelle pulls up. Before Michelle can even open her mouth to welcome the guys to the cocktail party, tell them, hey, how you doing? Chris takes it upon himself, okay, to make some sort of speech literally about nothing, just shading every single guy in the room, namely Nayte, but also everyone else, about how other guys, certain people, feel like they have it in the bag, and Michelle needs to watch out for these guys that are, like, not putting in effort because they think they have it in the bag. I had so many issues with this for a number of reasons. Mainly, to me, it really boils down to, like, you can be upset about it. Fine, that comment that Nayte said, that can get on your nerves, like, that's fair game, whatever. But the way that he addressed that and the setting in which he did it, it just felt very performative. It felt like when white people kind of try to center themselves in black issues, like when white allies come to, like, Black Lives Matter, like, protests or, like, join the conversation on social media, and black people are kind of having discourse, telling everyone, like, what the issue is, like, what's going on, what our platform is, whatever. And white people are like, oh, wait, stop. Like, let me interrupt you to tell you that I hear you. Let me tell you that I see you. Let me post this black square. Let me interrupt every valuable thing you were saying to tell you that I am here, instead of just being silent and listening to what you actually are saying. And I'm not saying this to say that this is necessarily a black issue just because Michelle is black. Like, I'm not saying that at all. It's just that that's what it reminded me of, like, that type of, like, attitude that you think you're being so helpful when really you're just, like, bulldozing the person who is just asking for your allyship and your participation. So that was just super annoying. On top of that, like, Michelle, she's a whole lead. She's a whole Bachelorette. Like, they wouldn't have picked her if she didn't have public speaking skills. Like, she is 100% capable of speaking for herself. She's 100% capable of discerning how situations are going. And if she wanted to address it, she would have addressed it. And that's that on that. Like, he didn't even give her the time, the opportunity. It's not his place. It's not his business. If she's bothered by how the guys think they have it in the bag or how the guys didn't show up for her that week, I mean, that's a personal problem. I mean, not to be rude, but, like, that's her problem. That's not his problem. His problem is, and it was ironic to me that he was over here making all this noise when he was on the date. He was on the group date. Like, Chris, you were one of the people that was also not showing up for her. Like, I think they had a little bit of a twister game in the beginning. But after that, I did not see him talk to her. If you really felt that strongly, you would have been out here calling out your guys when they were playing Duck Duck Goose. When they were playing Duck Duck Goose and, like, punch Olu's abs, he would have been like, hey guys, like, let's go get Michelle involved. Where's Michelle? Let's go pull her and make sure she's having fun with us as well. Like, Chris, if you felt this strongly about it, you would have done something about it in the moment. So he just really bothered me at that point in time. So then Chris, he just continues to be a nuisance. Brandon, he's like, hey, like, let me call you first, Michelle, da da da. And then Chris is like, oh, actually, I had her first. As though there's a sign up sheet and you sign up for an order or call dibs or something. Like, again, she's very capable of pulling someone, determining who she wants to talk to first. I think she just went to talk to him first just to kind of get it out of the way, because I think she knew if she didn't, he would be kind of lingering and hovering over every single conversation, like, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? So she just went and she talked to him first. And Chris, pretty much, he's just kind of brimming over with more, like, just fuel. Like, he's not done. That speech was not enough. He feels the need to tell Michelle what Nayte's comment was. And of course, this kind of made an impact on Michelle because, again, like, we know Nayte's a front runner. We know she has these certain set of expectations for him. And it's disappointing to hear that he might not be meeting them, or he might be portraying himself different than he actually is. So then Michelle pulls Nayte to the side and she kind of addresses with him what Chris said. And okay, so I had mixed feelings about how this conversation went. Michelle kind of says, hey, like, this is what Chris said to me. Like, she says it in a very neutral way. Like, she's not being accusatory, but she's also not like, you know, I totally don't believe him, like, whatever. Like, she's just kind of laying it out there and letting him respond. And Nayte says, hey, you know, I can't control how other people feel about me. I can't control how other people interpret my words. And on the one hand, I was glad that he didn't get too riled up and didn't make a big deal about it and, like, give Chris more energy than he deserves, especially in Nate's own one-on-one time with Michelle. But on the other hand, like, although Chris is taking this statement to such an extreme, at the end of the day, Nayte did say something to that effect. So I would have appreciated if Nayte had just said something like, hey, you know what, like, I did say something like that. I can understand why someone might feel away hearing it, but I didn't mean it in any type of cocky way. I was just kind of saying that more so to reassure myself and keep a positive spirit in my own head about this process. You know, like, just, it doesn't have to be deep. It can just like that, quick 2-second, like, explanation and moved on. So I do wish he kind of would have taken a little bit more accountability in that moment. But it is what it is. Michelle also takes that time to remind him that regardless of if he said it or not, regardless of if he actually feels the way that Chris is saying that he feels, no one should feel like they have it in the bag. Like, absolutely no one should feel any type of claim to her, even if they win, even if they get engaged to her at the end. No one should feel like they have it in the bag. And let me just say, I love the attitude. I think that is the attitude any woman should be taking with any men, because that's the thing. You got to keep men on their toes, okay? You got to keep them guessing. You got to have a little bit of mystery. Even if you get engaged, get married, whatever. I'm speaking as though I'm engaged. What do I know? But I mean, the reality of the situation is, like, sometimes men, they get entirely too comfortable. They get way too comfortable. They stop doing what they were doing in the beginning to pursue you. They get lazy. They think they have everything in the bag, when really you gotta maintain that energy that you brought. You gotta keep that energy, because it's like, I fell in love with a certain type of energy. I did not fall in love with laziness. I did not fall in love with lack of effort, lack of reciprocation. And if you think you're going to only do those things in the first beginning part of our relationship and just coast through the rest of it, I mean, you got another thought coming. So I'm really glad that she let him know that that's not how her relationships were going to operate. So then after that, Chris and Nayte have a little chit chat. And this is where, for me at least, Chris went from bad to worse. Like, he went from annoying, just kind of like a little nuisance, to like utterly problematic, and just, I was just really thoroughly done with him at this point. There were just so many like red flags and so many just like unacceptable things occurring in this interaction from that point on. So Nayte pulls Chris and he's like, hey, let's talk, let's hash this out, whatever. And he's trying to get to the bottom of, how this is brought up, why Chris had his name in his mouth during his conversation with Michelle. And Chris, he pulls the Jamie and he's like, oh, well, she was asking me. She probed, okay? And that word stuck out to Nayte. And Nayte said, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by probed? And Chris was really condescending. He's like, probed is asking a question. Probed is asking a question. Like, he said that approximately 30 times. And it was just so condescending. And, not everything is about race. But I think this is about race. Because would he have said this to another fellow white cast member? Or are you just assuming that because Nayte is tall and tatted and a black dude, that he doesn't know what the word probed mean? He doesn't know this SAT vocab word. Like, that was just so condescending. And it came from a subconscious place, right? Like, it didn't come from a place of, like, I explicitly think that Nayte, because of these features or these identities that he possesses, doesn't know what this word means. And it's not even really about the word. It's just insulting his intelligence and disrespecting him at large. And my thing was, the way I read the situation, I don't think that Nayte was asking him because he genuinely didn't understand what he was saying, obviously. I think he was asking him that because he knows Michelle. He knows that she's not out here snooping and searching for the drama. Like, she's not going to sit down with Chris, this guy she's not even barely interested in, and continue to ask him for his opinions when he already provided a plethora of his opinions unprompted. Like, she's not out here just continuously searching for his take on the matter. He's already given her his take. Like, she's not, And so I think Nayte knew in his mind, like, Michelle's not the one asking you for your opinion. So maybe if I continue to ask you how the situation went down, you'll tell me the truth. And then we had another microaggression. Then, Nayte, he's an expressive dude. He's talking with his hands. And Chris is like, oh, are you going to put your hands on me? Like, bro, first of all, let's get one thing straight. It is not Nate's fault that you are so short that you come up to his torso. Like, that's not his fault. That's just where his hands are. And it's not his fault that his hands are your eye level. Like, that's not his problem. That's not his fault. Number two, Nayte is not dumb. Like, we're on The Bachelor. This is the classiest reality show. This is not an MTV show. Like, there is going to be no fighting of any kind, even if he wanted to. And number three, like I said, this was a microaggression. Like, would he have said that? Would he have assumed that if he were talking with a fellow white cast member? I think we know the answer to that. And then, to top it off, in his confessional, Chris completely, 100% unabashedly owns his little white savior complex, talking about, oh, I came in on a white horse to save her from her castle. Like, Chris, who asked you? Like, who asked you? And his whole attitude the whole night was very saviorish because he was just kind of like, oh, like, I'm the only one sticking up for Michelle. I'm the only one who has our best interests at heart. And I'm here kind of like an extension of her, sleuthing out the bad guys in the house. Like, she doesn't ask you, number one. And number two, she doesn't need that. Like, she's good, okay? And the thing that makes it worse is, like, truthfully, he doesn't care. He does not care about Michelle. He doesn't care about saving her, even if those were his real intentions. Like, this man does not care. All he cares about is kind of getting one over on the rest of the guys. And that was made abundantly clear during his conversation with Olu and Rick, which was just very cringy and uncomfortable. On top of him being rude and just disrespectful to them, he was being so hypocritical, and he was doing the exact same thing that he accused Nayte of by being like, oh, when I get a rose tonight, I know I'm getting a rose, this, that, and the third. He was outright, blatantly assuming that he was gonna get a rose based off of zero evidence. Like, sis is not feeling you. Like, when they left their little chit chat one-on-one, she hit him with a hard side hug. Like, she turned her whole shoulder to him, hit him with a cheek kiss. Like, there is no type of romantic connection between them. So it's confusing why he was this confident. Also, one thing, before we move on, one thing that cannot go unaddressed in this whole debacle was Nayte pronouncing the word bag like a Midwesterner. He was saying bag. Michelle, he was like, Michelle thinks that someone has it in the bag. Like, I really had to just pause at that moment and really start scanning the screen for when he would have a little gold tagline or whatever to let me know his location. This man, I don't know if he's from Austin, Texas, but that's where he's living currently. But it was just, it always grates on my ears when I hear that terminology, that accent, babe. I can't do it. So anyway, going back a little bit, want to cover, of course, Michelle's one-on-one date with Rick. So their date consists of going on like a little sky lift over the mountain. Super cute. I was glad that wasn't the only portion of the date. At first I thought that was going to be, I thought they were going to go up and down. But they went up to a little hiking trail spot, whatever. It was cute. They found this like wish box, which conveniently had all these notes about love and family. Like, okay, no one's wishing about winning the lottery. Like, okay. So, they open a wish that says, hey, like, I wish my dad could see the person that I've become. And this really triggered something in Rick. And we learned that his dad actually passed away 3 years ago. It's alluded to that he passed away by suicide, but it's never explicitly stated. But Rick goes more into the backstory during his dinner portion with Michelle and really just explains the whole story about how he, like, his dad and his mom were together, married, growing up. And then one day he found a text message on his dad's phone from another woman and basically confirmed that his dad was cheating on his mom. Rick decides to tell mom. A little while later, mom divorces dad, takes him and his brother, and they move out. And so that's kind of the end of their marriage. And for a long time, Rick really blames himself. He was 17 when he found this text message. So I completely understand that train of thought at that age. And I mean, at any age, really, like, you never want to feel like you have any part in your parents' relationship kind of going negative or south or whatever. So he blamed himself. And on top of that, his dad also blamed him, since he was the one that technically did blow up his spot, even though his dad's actions put him in that position. And his dad, it sounds like he still was able to maintain a relationship with his dad, despite his parents' divorce. But his dad did have depression, and he dealt with depression for about 10 years. And then eventually he passed away. And like I said, it was alluded to that the cause of death was related to his mental health issues, potentially via suicide. But that's unclear. Either way, Rick shares this story. Michelle hears it in a very compassionate and empathetic way. And I love that she's, very comforting and not putting a lot of pressure on him. She's kind of like, share with me as much as you want. Like, I love that it's not just like the typical Bachelor date where it's like, you're expected to come and sit and pour your heart out to the lead in the hopes of getting a rose. Like, she genuinely only wants these guys to share what they want to, and if they don't want to, there's other topics of conversation. So that was really nice. And then afterwards, Rick says some romantic stuff. I kind of zoned out. I don't know. But at the end, he's like, I zoned back in for his last sentence in which he said, I'm really looking forward to being able to say that I'm in love with you. And it's super cute. I mean, we already know that Rick's a sweetheart. He's romantic. So overall, a good date, very pleasant. And then, for the first time in Bachelor history, we have a musical guest that we know, and a song that we know, and it was just, wow, so exciting. So then, gonna take it all the way back to the beginning. We have to cover Martin's date with Michelle. They have a BMW race date. The word BMW was said approximately 50 times. We're on the BMW racetrack, racing with BMWs that do BMW activities. Like, we get it. Anyway, they do whatever they need to do. And then they get into the hot tub and they're kind of chit-chatting. I guess this is the day after Jamie was dismissed. And Martin, unprompted, just says, I still think Jamie's a good guy. Like, I still like him. He's still my friend. And in that moment, you can literally see the emotion leave Michelle's face. Like, deadpan. Like, she is just, I think it shocked her. And she kind of says, you know, like, I really need someone, whoever I ended up with at the end of this, to trust me, trust my decision making, and know that I made that decision with all the information I had available to me at the time. Because Martin, taking it upon himself to say this, makes it sound like he's questioning her decision, undermining her judgment, and that's never a good feeling in a relationship. And so they kind of leave on a little bit of an awkward note, because Martin, he, instead of realizing that he kind of isolated Michelle in this moment, he plows forward, and he's like, oh, you know, well, I can't speak to your relationship with him, but I just know how he was in the house, and, like, I really liked him through my interactions with him. Like, okay, Martin, okay, what do you want me to do with that information? Like, he's not here, and he's not coming back, so why are you telling me this? You know, like, it was very unnecessary. I feel like he dug himself into a hole for literally no reason. Nevertheless, we go on the dinner portion of the date, and Michelle, she gets right to it. And I respect that about her, because I would have done the exact same thing. I think that she had time to kind of gather her thoughts during their break from the day and the night portion of the date. And she explains to him, like, hey, I really did not appreciate the way that you kind of were approaching me or talking to me about the Jamie situation. Like, I really need someone that's going to have faith in me during this process. And Martin, I guess he too had time to reflect on how that interaction went. We love it when guys self-reflect. That is so rare and hard to find. So we love guys that self-reflect. And he is not defensive at all. He says, you know what, I can understand why you would feel that way. I know that I can come off as, like, brash or blunt or whatever. And thank you for having that accountability for me. And I love that response. I love that, you know, even though he kind of had a blunder and they got off on the wrong foot a little bit, I love that he was able to take it in stride and just very gracefully and graciously kind of correct for his mistakes, and then also use it as a moment to spark some vulnerability and say, hey, like, not only am I going to apologize and let you know that I hear where you're coming from, I'm also going to use this as a time to tell you more about myself and my family. And I love that he didn't necessarily use it as an excuse. He wasn't like, oh, well, you can't get mad at me that I have bad communication because my dad has bad communication. Like, he didn't use it as an excuse. It was more so an explanation that was framed around, I want to break this cycle. I recognize this growing up and looking back. I know that these patterns were unhealthy. And moving forward in my own interpersonal relationships with my future kids, this is how I want to carry myself. So I loved it, and also allowed Michelle the opportunity to open up about her own struggles with being communicative. And she talked about how she had to have her own process of expressing herself with her family and with other people. So I love that they were able to connect on that. Very mature conversation all around. I also love that Michelle gave him a second chance, right? Like I said, in the hot tub, she was done. Like, her face, there was no emotion. Like, she was ready to just kind of throw in the towel, I think. But I love that she took a moment to calm down, take a step back from the situation, and say, hey, let me try one more time to express to him how I'm feeling and see where that goes. That's super important in relationships, because in relationships, your partner's gonna say and do things that get on your nerves. They're gonna say things that are wrong or to make you feel a certain type of way. But if your first instinct is just kind of to run at the first sign of the first thing that kind of rubs you the wrong way, you're never going to be able to stay into any relationship, because every relationship, someone's going to say something that pisses you off. So the hallmark of a strong relationship are those couples that can take those moments of miscommunication or disagreements even, and come together to form kind of a middle ground and be able to see where each party is coming from in their communication styles and what their thought process was. So I love that they modeled that for us, practiced healthy communication. I hate that I don't feel like Martin is going, too far, but I'm glad they at least have a healthy little connection while he's here. So then, of course, I gotta touch on the guys that also stuck out to me from this episode. There weren't too many, because I feel like this episode was super entrenched with just, like, the drama and everything, but there were a couple. So, the first being Joe. I loved, like, the little intimate date that he set up for Michelle. He brought her some M&Ms and a blanket. And the reason why I love this is because he was on the group date, right? So he was part of the problem, part of the people that weren't really interacting with her, making her feel unseen. But then he wasn't at the after party, so he didn't receive that communication about how she actually felt during the date. So he likely received... He likely heard the story from the other guys about how she felt. And it's one thing to be at the after party, right? And to be there and be like, hey, like, I'm right in her face right now. Of course, I gotta make up for lost time and try to apologize to her and do what I can to course correct right now. But then it's a totally another thing to hear it away from the situation and still say, hey, I was responsible for that. I was part of that problem. Let me make sure I can get us back on track later. Because I think the thing is, I don't think Michelle would have brought it up again. Not because she wasn't, like, annoyed or whatever. I just think she is ready to move on from the situation. So even though she might have still in the back of her mind been looking at Joe sideways, I think she would have just kind of put the past in the past. But I'm so glad that he took that extra step to say, hey, like, I didn't have the opportunity to make it up for you at the after party, but it didn't leave my mind. I want to make sure you know, like, that I do feel bad for this, and this is how I want to enjoy our time now. And I just loved that it was, like, so intimate as well, because I just felt like the whole cocktail party was just swirling of drama and fights and Nayte and Chris, and that watching that scene just felt like a little escape. Like, it felt like Michelle was kind of able to step into another dimension, almost. A dimension where calm and peace exist, and she could just relax and forget about everything in a moment. And that is a top tier trait in a guy. A guy that can make you feel calm and safe. Like, that is... I love it. I'm here for it. But also, one thing that cannot go unaddressed, y'all. Joe pulls out this cup of M&Ms, and Michelle says... I've actually never had these before. What? Like, what? That is a staple of American candy. How are you a whole teacher? Like, how are you living? I don't understand. I'm very concerned. I'm very confused. I have a lot of questions. Like, honestly, several questions. And Joe did not react accordingly, so I have questions for him as well. If I had heard that, everything would have come to a stop. I would have been like, please elaborate, please. Like, he just skirted past it. Like, she didn't just say that. So I would love for someone to circle back to this moment. Maybe I wish we could submit audience questions for after the final rose, because I would 100% want to know what's going on. What are we up to? So then the last moment, or the last guy that stuck out to me, was Olu. Of course, at the group date, he was very moved and very touched by the speech that Michelle gave to them, and talking about how she felt unseen and how it reminded her of the feeling that she expressed in her poem in the past week. And it moved him to the point of tears. And again, I'm really appreciative that The Bachelor, Bachelorette is using its massive platform to show us this vulnerability, this range of emotions from Black characters, especially with him being a dark-skinned person. I love that he was able to have that moment and really express himself, because Black men, specifically dark-skinned Black men in society, are the least palatable. Like, they're seen as the most aggressive. Like, they're just the hardest for people to digest. They're seen as the most, like, intimidating, or whatever take people have. So I love that we were able to see a softer side, a more vulnerable side, and show, like, Black guys, dark-skinned Black guys, like, they have emotions too. Like, I love that. The only thing, and I feel like this is going to be an unpopular opinion, so, you know, the only thing that kind of bothers me, I am never a fan of the narrative of guys only being able to relate to what a woman is going through by relating it to another woman. You know, like, he took in what Michelle was saying. He didn't invalidate it by any means, but he was just kind of like, oh man, like, I understand what she's going through because of my sisters, you know? And it's like, I'm not taking that away from him. Like, I love that he was able to make that connection, but I feel like so often men are only able to get behind, like, women's issues or, like, women's movements by saying, oh, you know what? Like, I have a mom, or I might have a daughter someday, so, like, I need to care about this issue. It's like, why can't it just be, she's a person? Like, she's a person that I know, she's a person that I like. Like, why does it have to connect back to another woman that you know for it to click for you, you know? So, I don't really, I'm not too much of a fan of that type of narrative. But I don't think it came from a bad place. Like I said, like, I'm glad that he was able to make that connection and that bond with her as well as in his mind. And if it allowed for him to empathize with her and relate to her, obviously it produced a beautiful and vulnerable and tender moment between them. So I'm in support of it. I'm just speaking more in general. But those are kind of all the highlights that I had from this episode. So please let me know in the comments, what did you think of this episode? Who's sticking out to you? Who are you rooting for? And I'll see you back here next week for another episode of Brianna's Bachelor Breakdown.